What's poppin'? What's poppin'? What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? We are back inside the conversation known as In My Own Words. Stephen M. Smith, and we got the opportunity to look into the impending quarterback battle between Jalen Hurts and Tua Tagovailoa. Nick Saban has discussed wanting to play both quarterbacks, wanting to use both quarterbacks. How will the entire thing be played out? It will be interesting, especially with spring ball, summer workouts, fall camp, both guys competing. Should be a very fun, entertaining matchup. Also, got a chance to dive into the injury that occurred to Tagovailoa in spring ball, injuring his index finger on his left hand, his throwing hand, but had surgery on it. And his family very strong in saying that do expect the rising sophomore to be back prior to the Crimson Tide's annual A-Day game. And with Alabama starting the second week of spring ball today, we look at Nick Saban's ability, or Nick Saban's love for experimenting with his players. Nick Saban is kind of like that bartender. Loves to mix your drinks, loves to engage you in conversation when he wants to, or when he wants to spout off on a rant or a tirade, and loves to provoke, appease, get a rise out of your emotions. What do I mean by that? When you look at Nick Saban in spring ball, he likes to tinker with the roster. Certain guys who are used to playing in certain positions likes to move them around, create depth, see can they be versatile, be diverse, can handle different spots. And for a lot of fans, they look at this and go, well, Nick, this guy is so used to playing on the offensive line, why move him to the defensive line? This guy is so used to playing at wide receiver, why flip him over to DB? This guy is so used to playing running back, why flip him to linebacker? I mean, you get what I'm saying. When you have a certain player that's used to being in a defined role, why move him to a different spot, seeing how you probably, or you may have lost a couple of guys to the National Football League or the graduation? Why do you take a guy that's played so much at a certain spot and move him around? Because it's spring. Nick Saban likes to put on his mad scientist hat. There are three things that Alabama fans equate with spring. You equate daylight savings time, crazy weather, and Nick Saban experiments. That's what you equate with spring. And right now, especially during the first week of practice on last week, Nick Saban, a lot of shifting, moving around on the offensive line. He talked about in his presser to open this semester that there are going to be a couple of moves made on the offensive line because they're trying to get the best five guys on the field, the best five guys to work cohesively. He's right now looking at Rosh Pierschbaker at center. Pierschbaker, who has played 42 career games at left guard, looking at him at center. He's looking at Josh Casher, who in 2014, coming out of St. Paul Episcopal High School in Mobile, Alabama, Casher was the nation's #1 rated center coming out of high school for that 2014 class. He is being looked at left guard. And Jedrick Wills, who was number 33 or 34 on the ESPN 300 in this past recruiting cycle for 2017, not 2018, but 2017, he is being looked at right tackle, seeing how Matt Womack will miss the entire spring due to a foot. I'll say this right now. Just because Saban is experimenting with somebody in the spring does not necessarily mean they'll take that spot in the fall. Just because he's tinkering with the roster, he's trying to create depth. Not a lot of the guys from the 2018 class are on campus right now to fulfill that depth, so he's moving a bunch of guys around. So just because you're being experimented in a spot in spring ball does not necessarily mean you're going to be at that spot come fall camp, come the 2018 college football season. When you look at the defensive backfield, due to the fact that, Jalen Armour Davis is not on campus, Patrick Surtain Jr. not on campus, Josh Jobe not on campus. The only early enrollee for that 2018 class in the secondary was junior college transfer Savion Smith. Alabama's got Devonta Smith, the wide receiver who caught the touchdown pass from Tua Tagovailoa against Georgia in the national championship game. He's earning individual reps at the cornerback position right now. But according to Nick Saban, during his first press conference, Alabama does not want to have Devonta Smith in the secondary. He can play some corner, but Alabama would much rather have him at wide receiver. The only reason why he's at this particular spot right now is the Crimson Tide players that it's recruited for the 2018 class have not arrived in spring, or will not arrive in spring, will more than likely arrive during the summer. And once again, just because you are put in a particular spot in spring does not mean that will be your role in fall camp and in the upcoming season. Case in point, Ross Pierschbaker 2 years ago was being experimented at center. He was there from spring ball, summer workouts, to deep into fall camp prior to that week before the season opener between Alabama and University of Southern California, where he was switched out for Bradley Bozeman. And from what I heard, the reason why that took place was Pierschbaker had some issues with timing the snap count. The center to quarterback exchange wasn't always crisp during that point in fall camp. And when you look at Bradley Bozeman in 2014, when Ryan Kelly went down to an injury against Ole Miss, Bozeman came in, held his own, and would earn 2 starts that year against Arkansas and Texas A&M, and that would parlay into him being a 2-year starter at center 2016, and of course this past season. So Pierschbaker started off at center in 2016, spring ball, summer workouts, deep into fall camp before getting switched out for Bradley Bozeman, and he's now back at that same spot to start this spring. Very athletic, can be a versatile, diverse player, but we'll just have to see. Just interesting there. If you look back at recent Nick Saban experiments, we all remember 2015, Cooper Bateman, the quarterback that Alabama signed in 2013 from Cottonwood High School, Murray, Utah. Very highly touted recruit. Because he ran a 4.59 in the 40-yard dash during spring testing, the Crimson Tide felt like it could experiment with him at wide receiver, see what type of a look that would provide. We all know how that ended up. Bateman never took one snap as a receiver, stayed at quarterback, and after not having his best outing against Ole Miss in 2015, and in 2016, Jalen Hurts rising to the occasion, beating out Bateman, Barnett, and David Cornwell. The other 3 ended up transferring. Also, Christian Jones and Cyrus Jones, both guys came in as wide receivers. Nick Saban taught Christian Jones how to be a defensive back, didn't really never became a DB, played wide receiver his entire career, but Nick Saban taught him how to be a defensive back. You look at Cyrus Jones, came in 2012 as a wide receiver, did some things as a defensive back in spring ball. Now, he was ultimately flipped over in 2013 to DB, but that was because Alabama had a lot of wide receivers already, and there was a need at defensive back. The Tide thin at that position, and they were thin at that position during fall camp as opposed to spring ball. That's why Cyrus Jones was flipped over. We all know the ever-popular Blake Sims, former Alabama quarterback, when he came in as an athlete, played at wide receiver, running back, defensive back, before being thrown into the fire as a backup quarterback in 2012 and 2013, and in 2014 became a starter. You look at Trayvon Diggs as a freshman in 2016, played both wide receiver and defensive back before this past year being solely a DB, and now this year looks to really hone in his skills in the secondary. There was even that situation with Johnny Dwight, who came as a defensive lineman and then was flipped over to tight end, had some sessions at tight end, now back solely on the defensive line. So Saban has done a bunch of experimenting during his time as a head coach. He's done a bunch of it. But once again, just because you are at a particular spot in spring does not mean that will be your ideal spot unless there's a need. Now, if there's a ideal need, if there's a pressing need, if Alabama did not sign enough receivers, and you take a DB and you try him at wide receiver, he could potentially be flipped over wide because there's a need at wide receiver. Vice versa, if Alabama had a recruiting class where it did not sign enough defensive backs and there's a wide receiver that has the capability to be a DB, he's got the ball skills, you can teach him the tackling prowess, all of those things, and being the defensive back because there's a need, you can see him flipped over there. Same for offensive and defensive linemen, same for linebackers, what have you. If there's a need, then there could be the potential switch in spring ball. But if there's not a need, then Nick Saban just tinkering, moving around with that roster. But right now, when you look at that offensive line, Jonah Williams, left tackle, Josh Casher, left guard, Rosh Pish-Baker, center, Lester Cotton, right guard, Jedrick Wills, right tackle, Devonta Smith being experimented at corner in the secondary. That's what took place during the first week of spring ball as the second week starts off today. Taking us to our next break here on In My Own Words, the podcast, Touchdown Alabama Magazine, Stephen M. Smith. Upon our return, it's about doggone time. But like I said, folks, news, information hits you in mysterious ways, in different aspects, and you got to get to the big news first. But coming back, we finally touch on, with the absence of Daron Payne moving on to the National Football League, the upcoming NFL Draft, there is a 3-man rotation to fill in for him at that defensive tackle spot. Who is in that 3-man rotation and who ultimately wins the job? Touch it up on the other side of the break. Don't go anywhere, folks. We'll be right back. It's your boy, Stephen M. Smith, host of In My Own Words, the podcast. If you are a fan of this show, then I encourage you to subscribe to the Touchdown Alabama Magazine YouTube channel. Also follow the brand on Facebook, Twitter, and other forms of social media as we continue to bring you the best in Alabama football and Crimson Tide athletics.